This used to be a golden ticket, a direct claim on a piece of real, physical gold. Today, it's a promise, a piece of paper, or more likely, a number on a screen, that we all agree has value. But what is that promise actually based on? What did we lose when gold left the equation? And what has that shift truly cost us? The story of money is the story of civilization itself. It's a journey from tangible value to an abstract system of global trust. It's the story of how this piece of paper went from being a receipt for something real to being backed by nothing more than faith in the institutions that print it. To understand the world we live in today, a world of inflation, rising costs, and digital currencies, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to understand why money used to mean something very, very different. Imagine a world before money. If you were a chicken farmer who needed new shoes, you had a problem. You'd have to find a shoemaker who not only had your size but also just happened to want some chickens. This clumsy system is called barter, and it's incredibly inefficient. For economies to grow, societies needed a better way to trade. The solution was commodity money. This is when people agree to use a specific useful item as a medium of exchange. It could be anything, as long as it was believed to have value. In ancient Rome, soldiers were sometimes paid in salt because it was vital for preserving food. That's where we get the word salary from the Latin salarium. Other cultures used shells, beads, or even cattle. But over time, one commodity consistently won out precious metals. Gold and silver had all the right stuff. They were durable. They don't rust or decay. They were easily divisible into smaller units, like coins. They were portable, so you could carry your wealth. And crucially, they were scarce. You couldn't just find a pile of gold in your backyard. This scarcity gave them a stable, intrinsic value. Gold wasn't just a symbol of money, it was money. A gold coin's value was the value of the metal it contained. This was a system of tangible wealth. You could hold it, weigh it, and know exactly what it was worth. There was no need for trust in a government. The value was right there in your hand. But carrying around bags of heavy, clinking gold had its own problems. It was risky. Bandits were a very real threat. And for large transactions, it was just inconvenient. This problem would lead to one of the most important financial innovations in history. So how did we get from heavy gold coins to lightweight paper money? The solution was simple, yet brilliant: the goldsmith. People began storing their gold with local goldsmiths who had secure vaults. In return, the goldsmith would issue a paper receipt, a promise that the holder could come back at any time and claim their gold. Soon, people realized they didn't need to go back for the gold to do business. You could just hand over the paper receipt. The person who received it knew it was just as good as gold because they could go and redeem it themselves. These receipts were the world's first banknotes. They were, in essence, claimed checks for gold. This dollar bill's ancestor was exactly that, a golden ticket. This is the core idea behind the gold standard, which dominated the world for much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Under this system, a country's currency was directly linked to gold. In the United States, the Gold Standard Act of 1900 formally set the value of the dollar at 23.22 grains of pure gold, which worked out to $20.67 per troy ounce. This meant you could, in theory, walk into a bank with about $20 and walk out with an ounce of gold. The gold standard's most powerful effect was the discipline it imposed on governments. They couldn't just print more money whenever they wanted. Every new dollar had to be backed by a corresponding amount of gold in their vaults. This created a natural brake on government spending, and, most importantly, on inflation. Historical data show that under metallic standards, the long-run average inflation rate was close to zero. The gold standard provided long-term price predictability and a stable foundation for international trade, since every major currency had a fixed value in gold. This wasn't a system based on trusting politicians. It was based on the physical reality of a scarce metal. The money in your pocket represented a direct claim on a real, tangible asset. It meant something. But the gold standard wasn't perfect. For all its long-term stability, it could create a lot of short-term pain. While average inflation was low, the year-to-year volatility could be extreme. One study found that short-term price instability was dramatically higher under the gold standard than in the modern era. Prices could swing wildly, from sharp inflation one year to devastating deflation the next, creating huge uncertainty for businesses and workers. And deflation was the gold standard's Achilles heel. Deflation is when prices fall, which sounds good, but it can be economically catastrophic. If you know your money will be worth more tomorrow, you stop spending it today. Economic activity grinds to a halt. For anyone with debt, deflation is a nightmare because the real value of what you owe keeps increasing. The system's biggest weakness was its rigidity. The money supply was tied to the slow, unpredictable rate of gold mining. If the economy grew faster than the gold supply, it could trigger deflation. This inflexibility became a crippling problem during major crises. When World War I broke out, governments needed to spend vast sums to fund their war efforts. They couldn't wait to dig more gold out of the ground. The rigid constraints of the gold standard were a straitjacket they couldn't afford. Many countries temporarily suspended it, printing the money they needed to fight. The system was pieced back together after the war, but it was never the same. Then came the Great Depression. As economies collapsed, people hoarded gold, pulling money out of the banking system and making the crisis worse. Governments were hamstrung. They needed to stimulate their economies, but the gold standard prevented them from doing so. To save their economies, country after country made a painful choice. They abandoned gold. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt effectively took the US off the domestic gold standard, even making it illegal for private citizens to own large amounts of gold. The golden ticket was starting to look less and less golden. We're at a pivotal moment in our story, the beginning of the end for gold. If you're finding this history of your money fascinating, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into how our world really works. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's get to the day the final link was severed. After World War II, world leaders tried to build a more flexible version of the gold standard. At a 1944 conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, they created a new system. The US dollar was crowned the world's reserve currency. All other major currencies were pegged to the dollar, and the dollar alone remained pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This meant other countries could hold dollars as if they were gold, trusting the US to honor its promise to redeem those dollars for metal. For a while, it worked. The US held about 3/4 of the world's official gold reserves, and post-war reconstruction fueled huge demand for American goods. But by the 1960s, the cracks began to show. The costs of the Vietnam War and massive domestic spending programs meant the US government was printing far more dollars than it had gold to back them up. Other countries, especially France, got nervous. They saw the US flooding the world with paper and realized the promise of $35 an ounce was becoming mathematically impossible. So they began calling America's bluff. They started showing up at the US Treasury, demanding to exchange their dollars for physical gold, as was their right. America's gold reserves began to plummet. The hoard that was supposed to back the world's financial system was flowing out of the country at an alarming rate. By the summer of 1971, the US faced a choice: either default on its promise or fundamentally change the nature of money forever. On the evening of August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and announced he was closing the gold window. He declared that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold for foreign central banks. That temporary suspension is still in effect today. This event, known as the Nixon shock, was the final nail in the gold standard's coffin. While it took until 1973 for the world's currencies to begin freely floating, this was the moment the last formal link between money and a physical commodity was severed. The golden ticket was officially gone. Money had become an act of faith. Welcome to the age of fiat money. The word fiat comes from Latin, meaning let it be done. Fiat money has value simply because a government decrees it is legal tender. It's not backed by a physical commodity. It's backed only by the trust we have in the government that issues it. This is the system we all live under today. The aftermath of the Nixon shock seemed to confirm the worst fears about this new system. Without the discipline of gold, governments were free to print money, and they did. The 1970s became a decade of runaway inflation, a period known as the Great Inflation. The purchasing power of the dollar plummeted. Since 1971, the US dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power when measured by the Consumer Price Index. This is the core pain many people feel today, the sense that their money just doesn't go as far as it used to. However, many economists argue that the high inflation of the 70s wasn't inevitable, but the result of policy mistakes. Over time, central banks, like the US Federal Reserve, learned to manage the new system. They developed new tools, most notably inflation targeting, to keep inflation low and stable, usually around 2%. This modern approach offers one huge advantage: flexibility. A central bank can respond to an economic crisis. During a recession, it can increase the money supply to encourage spending and shorten the downturn. The stimulus sent out during the 2020 pandemic, for example, would have been impossible under the strict limits of a gold standard. Fiat money allows the financial system to be elastic, to expand and contract based on the needs of the economy, not the amount of metal in a vault. The data shows a clear trade-off. The gold standard offered very low long-term inflation but came with extreme short-term volatility and handcuffed governments during crises. Fiat money has brought more short-term price stability and the flexibility to fight recessions, but at the cost of higher average inflation. So, what was the real cost of this transition? It wasn't just a technical change, it was a philosophical one. We traded a system based on a physical constraint for one based on an institutional promise. We replaced gold with trust. The argument for gold is, at its heart, an argument for limiting government power. It reflects a sentiment often attributed to President Herbert Hoover. We have gold because we cannot trust governments. Proponents argue that tying currency to a physical asset prevents politicians from the temptation of printing money to fund wars or pay off debts by devaluing the currency. The gold standard acts as an automatic check on political power. The argument for fiat is an argument for human agency. It says that a modern economy needs a system that can adapt to shocks. It puts faith in institutions, in the expertise of central bankers and economists, to steer the economy through turbulent waters. In this view, being chained to gold is like trying to navigate a supertanker with a 19th century rudder. The cost, then, was the loss of that physical anchor. The certainty that your money represented a fixed amount of something real is gone. In its place, we gained flexibility, but we also inherited a new kind of risk. The value of our savings now rests entirely on the credibility and competence of the institutions managing our money. The stability of our financial world now depends on the promises of men and women in boardrooms. Our journey has taken us from trading chickens to carrying gold coins to holding paper receipts for that gold, and finally to a world where our money is backed by nothing more than collective faith. The dollar bill is no longer a golden ticket. It's a social contract. We traded the rigid, volatile certainty of gold for the flexible, but fragile system of trust. The gold standard provided a hard anchor that limited government power, but left economies vulnerable to short-term shocks. The fiat system gave us tools to fight recessions, but at the cost of persistent inflation and placing our financial fate in the hands of fallible human institutions. There is no perfect answer. Both systems have profound strengths and weaknesses, but as we stand at another monetary crossroads, with the rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, often called digital gold, the debate is more relevant than ever. What should money be? A tangible asset? A government promise? Or something else entirely? What do you think? Is a system based on trust ultimately better than one based on gold? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching.